Good evening, folks. Welcome to another edition of Citizens Alliance for Better Candidates. Joe Oddo with you. I am a candidate for Congress in South Carolina, and my website is bettercandidates.org. But the purpose of this is to talk to folks who have been candidates, maybe even an elected official here and there, which we have the honor of having one tonight. So I'm going to introduce Gail Farrell Parker. She was on the ballot with me many times up in Virginia. We were the independent Greens, and we were just agitating the heck out of the big parties, but also the other Greens up there. And then Dr. Jim Rex is with us tonight. He's been elected to the State Board of Education here in South Carolina. So we're all South Carolina residents now. Gail's moving here soon. Welcome to everybody. Thanks again. And we're going to open it up with Gail. Tell us, there's a rumor going around you were on the ballot 10 times in a row.
Well, that is a correct rumor.
So I have this right. Now, I remember the one we worked on in 2006 when you were on for U.S. Senate. I was on for Congress. All over the state we went declaring W and his administration and the oil party incumbent senator they had at the time were spending their money, driving up deficits. There was nothing conservative about them. That was our message. And that sort of resonated with people. Tell us about the outcome of that election.
Well, I believe that's the first one where I got credited with changing the control of the U.S. Senate with my campaign. I have ran so many times, Joe. Actually, I get the campaigns mixed up, but it was very.
That was the one that Colbert had you on, or at least mentioned you, because when you say you change the control of the Senate, what that means is, folks, when the oil party guy was near the end, they offer us independents. Oh, you need to go bail out and throw your votes to us. And I think they were taking a shot at Gail for that. Like, well, all they had to do really, maybe we would have considered it if they had picked up the high-speed rail that we were promoting. But the guy lost by 8,000 votes. And how many votes did you get, Gail? You remember?
I got more than that.
22,000.
Right. And Colbert was really faulting him for not, for not supporting rail and saving the control of the Senate.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes we can make a difference. I think that was the second time
that I ran forward. Yes, we can. Yeah.
And that's why those larger parties sometimes, I remember going back around the state afterwards, and man, some of those guys were so mad at us. They wouldn't talk to us. They didn't want to associate with us. So that's the risk we as outsiders take when we take on the challenge of not aligning with the big two. Now, Dr. Rex, you came at the independent side of things from a different perspective. You were elected in the big party, served 4 years as superintendent of education here in South Carolina. So what made you jump out of that into the third party world?
Well, people talk about the sausage factory, right? No one would eat sausage if they saw it being made in a sausage factory. Well, being elected to office at the statewide level for 4 years, I, of course, had to work with both the Republicans and the Democrats, even though I had been elected as a Democrat. And it didn't take long to realize that the system was badly broken and that both parties were equally responsible for it, including the one that I had run under. And so, I got more and more frustrated. This is a bit of an overstatement, but I tell people after being in office, it's a little bit, I think, like being a Holocaust survivor. Once you've seen it and experienced it, it's hard not to tell other people about it. And the average citizen is getting more and more discouraged and frustrated with the system, but not as much as any conscientious, patriotic person who's actually been in office and served. Unfortunately, most people who have been in office won't call it out for what it is because there are too many rewards for staying in the system and almost no rewards, actually punishments, for leaving it and speaking out against it.
Well, and that's a great point. And so when you formed this new alliance, you came up with a couple of great initiatives that basically are seeking citizen legislators to serve honorably, transparently. That's one. And then that basically, I guess, takes the conflict of interest out. But the second thing you have is also the term limits. With it. Tell me more about how you formulated, how'd you come up with those ideas?
Well, one of the most apparent, one of the most troublesome things with the present system, I learned again this very early in my career in office, is that even when elected legislators know what the right thing is to do, if it gets in the way of getting reelected and staying in office, having a career in politics, being a career politician, that always takes precedent. Getting elected is the priority. And so became apparent to me, and I think to a lot of Americans, when they see people who have been in office for decades and are only concerned about staying in office, that term limits is absolutely essential. That if we're going to attract people who are not interested in having a career of 20 or 30 years as an elected official, but are interested in providing public service, we're going to have to attract them to a profession that requires them to go in, hopefully make a difference for their community or their state or their nation, depending on the office, and then go back home and live under the laws you helped create, or find some other worthwhile way to make a contribution. You don't have to be in elected office to help your community or your state or your nation. So I think term limits is a really important component that's missing from our system right now. It's not a silver bullet. It's not a panacea. It wouldn't solve all of the problems, but it would attract a different type of politician to run for office.
Exactly. Good point. So, Gail, I'm going to go back to you and ask the whole process of running. Tell me whether you recall how it felt to stand in the back of the Chamber of Commerce, big couple hundred people in the room. Your opponents are on stage debating, and there you are at the back of the room because they wouldn't have let you on the stage. Tell me how that felt. That had to be humbling.
Well, I am not a politician. I am a citizen that found an issue that I felt could be corrected only in the political area. So quite honestly, Joe, I felt a little bit relieved because I didn't have to be up there on stage and debating. However, as a citizen who believes in our system, I found it appalling that candidates rightfully on the ballot and collecting signatures, 10,000 valid signatures in Virginia was an ordeal to get on the ballot, and we did it. And then not to be allowed to speak in the debates, I found that appalling, and a little bit hurt about it too.
Exactly. I was a little different, a little luckier, as I was on the ballot for Congress, but I basically lobbied the incumbent Congress critters to allow me into the debates, because that same year in 06, the very first debate, the Democrat challenger didn't want me in. And so they had a debate with me in the back of the room, and he makes the bold announcement when the reporters asked him, well, why isn't the independent included in this debate? The guy actually says, oh, those independents don't have anything to say that you want to hear. Well, that got published in the paper. I mean, what a dumb thing for a guy to say, right? Well, needless to say, I was in every debate after that, and they even made me go through the litmus test at the television station. I had to go down in the Roanoke and answer 5 questions on screen like this with a tie, and I guess I passed the audition, because then we had the big debate with 3 of us at Liberty, and it was televised in 4 different market areas. And that was amazing to go because it was a big county. A big congressional district, 18 counties, and everywhere I went, hey, I saw you on TV. So that was kind of cool. I relish the opportunity to debate those folks, because when you get the incumbents out of their element, that it's not a comfort zone for them either. So that's surprising to me, Gail. I didn't realize you were that feeling uncomfortable about debating. I relish it. And you even conducted yourself pretty well on Green TV, for years as a host. So wow, what about you, Jim? Did you have some good debates? You probably had some lively campaign opportunities.
Yeah, we had 4 televised debates in my election. 2 of them were statewide public television. 2 were different regions of the state. I don't think I could have won without those because of straight party voting in the state. South Carolina is a very red state. And as you know, I'm the last Democrat to get elected to a statewide office in this state, and it's been nearly 20 years. So it was a bit of a fluke, I guess, in a way. I had never run for office before. I was somewhat known because I'd been in education. I've been a college president and been around the state, but largely an unknown when it came to politics. I'd never run before. I ran against a Republican who had defeated 4 challengers in the Republican primary without a runoff. So, and had all of the endorsements from the governor on. So the only way I really had a shot was to get on television. And those 4 debates made the difference.
Yeah, so like you said, the debates do make a difference. And I was, my profile, I could tell, was elevated, even though I really, I win by running. I don't like to say I lost, but my chances of winning were slim. I didn't really have the money the other 2 had, but still, that was a great opportunity to get some issues out there that we normally wouldn't, provide. Like you said, Jim, the other 2, the big parties, they run for cover, basically exchange their own ideas back and forth depending on which way the wind's blowing, right? And speaking of those ideas, Gail, you just recently sent an article out by someone we knew from Liberty University there in Virginia, who talked about the courage to dissent and why a vote for a third party is not just a losing proposition, but it's a long-term investment. You remember that article? Give me some.
Yes, that was the best article I have heard that really attacked the spoiler argument and made a lot of sense of the democracy, and a democracy should have participation the more at all levels. And although now it is very difficult for third party and independent candidates to participate, I believe there should be something done about that, really. We should be encouraging and make it easier for candidates to get on the ballot, and we would see a better crop of candidates, I feel. We would give the voters a better choice rather than personal attacks. I would hope that we would start seeing more about the issues and more positive candidates and more positive narrative in the campaign.
Yeah, I don't know if either of you got to see last week's episode where I had a couple of ladies on that had run, well, one that ran before, Victoria and Pat, and the whole discourse changes when a third party or an independent is thrown into the mix. Jim, give me your thoughts on that, because if you probably, I don't know if you watched Kamala last week when she finally did a TV interview, and she, was asked about, well, you said you were going to ban fracking. Now you don't want to ban fracking, and all she could say was, "Nope, I'm not going to ban fracking." I mean, she had an opening there to expand and talk about an energy policy. Did she leave the ball on the table there? I mean, what do you think?
Well, politicians, as I know both of you know this, get overly cautious sometimes. And part of that is that you have an army of consultants and advisors, some solicited, some paid for, and some not, who are always telling you what to do or what not to do, what to say and what not to say. Don't say too much, don't say too little, don't touch this topic because it's like a third rail, to use your project back there. But I think sometimes politicians think that saying less is better. It's less risky. Don't give too many details, because when you start giving details, you're going to find people who object to some portion of what you're explaining. So that gets in the way. And I think both of you are correct when you say that having a third voice, a third perspective, makes it more difficult for them to be cautious, because they don't just have to juxtapose themselves against one person, the lesser of two evils argument. Then they have to actually say, I have a better idea than this person or that person. So it makes for a much more constructive and healthy dialogue.
Indeed. So, yeah, weigh in on this one, would you? Jill Stein, she's in a spat with AOC recently because, well, obviously AOC tried to steal the Green New Deal. Now, this even predates Jill Stein, but the fact that there's AOC claiming, oh, Jill is nothing but a spoiler. She's going to, break the attacks just keep coming. I mean, why should, I mean, is that going to get legs, or should we just, how should we look at that whole mess?
Well, for one thing, the thought of a lot of the consultants now is that the best way is negative campaigning. And so the public, we should expect that right off the bat, it's going to be an attack, negative campaigning. And the reason that they recommend negative campaigning is it's been shown to work. Doesn't mean it's right, and it's not my style. I would prefer to stick with the issues. But Jill has got a lot of consultants. She's a instructor in political science at Harvard, and she'll hold her own.
Indeed. And as we try to get folks to participate and encourage them, we don't want to necessarily turn them off by all the negativity. So that's one thing that I appreciate being in the alliance with these folks, with Jim, you guys, the positivity. And that's something that Carrie and Gail and all of us as independent Greens did 20 some years ago. It was always about positive solutions, right, Gail? It was always about, we don't have to attack anybody's person. We can attack their policy. And that was the point that we always made to do, was to, that's why some of the incumbents allowed me in the debates, because they knew I wasn't going to go after them for beating their wife or anything. Somebody actually did that to George Allen. But, there's issues. Like when I was running against Virgil Good in the 6th District, and I was advocating for the fair tax. He wouldn't sign on as co-sponsor until October. I'm riding a bus in D.C. and I get a call from the local reporter. Hey, he finally signed your bill. So how about that? A month before the election. Sometimes we can make a difference, right?
Right.
So
definitely. There are a lot of issues when you have a third party or an independent candidate in the race. They will bring up issues that would never be discussed by the other two larger parties, and that's often by design to keep those issues out of the mind of the public. And if we really need to, instead of having surveys to define the hot button words to use to get somewhere, we need to be working on the issues and solving the issues of government. And that's what the politicians are for and elected, is to run the government and serve the people in the best way possible. And we can't really sort through all of that chaff that's in the media that's designed to pull the wool over our eyes if we don't have an open discussion of the real issues.
Indeed, and we were lucky actually back in the early aughts. One of the main issues around the DC Beltway where we were living at the time, Gail, was if we could have connected all the metro rails, which were going into DC and back out to get to different places, if we could connect them laterally around the Beltway, we wouldn't have had a need for the toll road. But I debated people like Cuccinelli on that. We lost, of course, because they had the no bid $6 billion contract awarded to the Australian company, and they got the toll roads. But those are the kind of issues. What was the main issue you were running on, Gail? Tell us what kind of success we got from running on that same issue over and over.
On the rail issue, well, the main thing is in DC, traffic is an everyday issue for everyone in this area. And they would sign a petition to get us on the ballot. More trains and less traffic, and everybody wanted less traffic. So it worked, and it demonstrated a political will to have more rail. So we do have now 8 train cars in the Metro rail system rather than the 6. They completely redid the stations in order to accommodate those 8 car trains. And we've also gotten connections through Amtrak to other parts of the state. And the high-speed rail connection to North Carolina is still being considered. One major change that's going to have to occur, though, is that we're going to have to allow electric trains and build the track to accommodate electric trains in Virginia. Otherwise, we're not having a high-speed rail, and all of those promises that have been made to our sister state can't be adhered to. So we've seen a lot of successes in Virginia about the rail to Roanoke, as you mentioned, to Norfolk, to Newport News, and the Purple Line is still being constructed. But there's still a long way to go, and there's much more to be done. And we really need to lessen the pollution in the area and get off of the fossil fuels.
Yeah, it was part of the bigger issue. So, and as we're having this whole purpose for having this really is to flip the script on the narrative that we are the spoilers, because really it's the big 2 parties that are spoiling it for us. Jim, you probably go along with that. I mean, the whole purpose for expanding our alliance and getting maybe 6 to 8 to change the fate in Congress. Tell us how that would work.
Well, that's a concept that's been around a while, but no one's implemented it yet. We're hoping we can this election cycle. It's called the fulcrum theory. And because anybody who's paying attention knows that the 2 parties flip back and forth the majority in the House and the Senate. And because the country's so evenly divided, that majority and minority is always very close. It's usually a majority, whether it's Republican or Democrat, of just a handful of people. But whoever has the majority, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, they have the same philosophy. It's my way or the highway. The majority rules. There's no cooperation. There's no consensus. So the fulcrum theory says that if you had a small group of independents and third-party people elected to the Congress, in the House or the Senate, that could take away the majority from either the Republicans or the Democrats, that new caucus, that handful of independents, could draw the more practical and pragmatic members of both parties to that center to actually pass legislation and get things done. So then instead of yelling at each other, there would be a reasonable group in the broad center who could actually start to make Congress work. I think that could work. The Alliance Party has 2 candidates. You're one of them that says that if you're elected to the Congress, you'll join and form an independent fulcrum caucus to take away the majority from the Republicans or the Democrats. We have a candidate in Minnesota who is also pledged to do that if she is elected. So there's three. We had 3 or 4 more, and who knows, 3 may be enough. We'll see what the November election does. It could be that close again that it may be just a majority of 1 or 2. So that's the theory. I hope we get to put it in practice.
All right, thanks for sharing that. So tell me more, Jim, about recruiting efforts. What do these campaigns are usually about addition. We're trying to recruit. Do you think we're having making some noise this year? How do you think? I think it was going way better when we had Kennedy and some foot soldiers on the ground, but now that he's rolled up, is that going to hurt us in the long run? What do you think?
Well, I think, there's an old cliche that any publicity is good publicity. There's no such thing as negative publicity. So
Right.
we were covered intensely for about a week. Our party was, when we decided to take Kennedy off the ballot and not have a presidential candidate. We're the only third party in the country that he used for ballot access that chose to do that. So we made some people happy. We made some people unhappy. But I think most people thought we stood on our principles when we said that a candidate who chose to withdraw and on top of that chose to endorse his former opponent in one of the 2 parties in the duopoly was not qualified to remain on our ballot. So I think we drew people, as you said, when he was our candidate. I think we're going to draw some people now because of the way we handled that situation. We've always had a good number of candidates and good candidates, and I think we'll always have. I'd rather have a small core of volunteers who work hard and do the right thing than a large group that are volunteers in name only.
Good point. There's a couple of states like Michigan, Wisconsin, and North Carolina, I think, that won't take him off the ballot. That kind of flies in the face. Obviously, we still had time before the certification was required, but you think that's going to have a bigger impact on the outcome?
Well, some of those, as you just said, some of those states, the deadline had passed. They couldn't take him off even if they chose to. So
Right.
that gave them an out. I think it's too early to tell what the impact of RFK Jr.'s alliance with Trump and the Republican Party is going to mean in the long run. We've already had so many surprises in this election cycle. Who knows what lies ahead between now and the first week in November. But I personally think, and this is just personal, this is not the Alliance Party's position, I think Kennedy made the wrong decision. And I think he has set back the independent movement to some extent. People are having a hard time deciding what an independent is, and his behavior and decisions made that even more difficult.
Yeah, I agree with you, and that is, it does hurt at the heart of those of us who have been independents for a while. We know, even when he decided to become an independent, we knew he was coming from the point of being an establishment hack. So just like the no labels people were, I mean, they weren't really looking for independents. They were looking for people who were already established in one of the big 2. And we can't say there's anything completely wrong with being in those parties. I was in that party for a little while, one of the big ones, and you do learn a lot. Like even doing this right here, they teach you television, they teach you media, they teach you feet on the street. There's a lot of good. And so everybody that wants to join our independent cause and be truly independent and be subject to being spoiled by those parties instead of us being the spoiler, don't get discouraged, because there is hope and there is better people coming up that will follow us. I mean, these were really class individuals right here. Gail Farrell Parker, Dr. Jim Rex. I mean, we really thank both of you guys for your service and all the years that you put into it, and the more to come, I'm sure. So give us a final thought there, Gail. We got 1 minute left.
Well, on the topic of JFK, I too was very disappointed that he dropped out. In defense of independents who run for office, there's a learning curve, and they often run 1 year and then find out how difficult it is to get on the ballot across the nation. And it's very discouraging. So there's a very steep learning curve, and they often don't listen to the people who know or have been there, like the Independent Green Party, on how to get on the ballot in Virginia, at least.
Exactly. So Jim, give us take us out there, please.
Well, as you know, as both of you know, over 70% of us, when we're polled, say we want to see a third party. Americans want to see a new choice. And this is the way to get it. And you're not going to get that third choice voluntarily created by the two parties. It's going to have to be forced upon them, and the voters have that power. So start voting for independents and third party candidates.
Right.
Very good. Absolutely. Well, thanks again, folks, for tuning in to Citizens Alliance for Better Candidates. Joe Oddo on the ballot here in South Carolina. Go to bettercandidates.org for more information. We'll see you next Wednesday, 9/11. We have two veterans going to join us. Should be an interesting conversation. Thanks again. Good night, everyone.